Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. In this video, a homeowner association Karen called the police on me but ignores that I'm not even a member of the HOA. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. The first one starts like this. I will never join an HOA. Never. Especially not after what the head of my local HOA did a few years ago. So when I bought my first home, it was located just outside of the HOA's jurisdiction, but it was not owned by them. I made sure to clarify that with the previous homeowner, and he and the realtor were able to provide copies of the survey of the property that showed it was outside of their jurisdiction. That did not stop them from wanting me to join up with them anyway. The president of the HOA, who I'm gonna call Karen because, well, really, she was one, was especially pushy. I swear every week I either had a flyer in my mailbox, one of those welcome baskets on my porch, or she would find me whenever I was doing yard work. She'd make comments about how just wonderful I was keeping the place and that joining the HOA would solidify my hard work by keeping the property values reasonable in the community. It was weird all around and I was always polite when I declined, but 2 months later, Karen still was not getting the hint. Now, one thing I love about my house is that it's got a pool. Yes, it's another thing I have to maintain and worry about, but the previous owner had it installed less than 3 years before they moved out. So I did not need to do much maintenance. I love being able to come home after a stressful day at work and just dive in. Of course, Karen would pick times that I was in the pool to try and ask me about joining the HOA, but most of the time I pretended to not hear her because I had water in my ears. Lame excuse, yes, but effective in getting her to leave. One night I got home after working some overtime. I was sweaty and the weather was humid, so I figured that I would take a dip in the pool for a bit, if only to cool down before bed. I got on my trunks and hopped in. For a few minutes, it was bliss. The night was calm, the water was at just the right temperature, and I could already feel my stress beginning to wash away. But then I heard a cut-off police siren and saw flashing red and blue lights. I immediately got out of the pool to see a police cruiser in my driveway. 2 cops were already out of the car, heading towards my pool. I grabbed a towel and asked what was going on, afraid that they were here on behalf of my elderly parents that lived a few miles away. One of the cops said that they had gotten a call from someone who claimed I was disturbing the peace and illegally using a pool at night. I was more than a little confused. There was not an ordinance in my neighborhood about using a pool at night, so why did someone call the cops? When I asked, the other cop said it was not the neighborhood's rules but the HOA's rules. I immediately knew that Karen was behind this, but I didn't want to get myself into any trouble. I explained that my house was not a part of the HOA and that whoever called must have been mistaken. The cops were a little skeptical at that, insisting that the caller had seemed very sure that my property was a part of this HOA. So I brought the cops into my house and showed them the land surveys along with the deed that indicated that the property was indeed owned by me and not the HOA. They were really nice about it, apologizing that they had to come to my home, but it was their duty to check on any reported issues. I followed them back out, glad that I'd been able to sort everything out, when I saw another car pull into my driveway. Karen got out of the car. Just from how she was approaching me, I grabbed my phone and started to record. I did not expect her to try anything with the police within earshot, but I was not gonna take any chances if she was there to harass me again. She demanded that the cops arrest me because I apparently was being a nuisance to the neighborhood. The police attempted to calm her down, letting her know that they talked to me, and I showed proof that my property was not under the HOA, but she was not having it at all. Karen called me a liar just trying to get out of paying the HOA fees and that she had a right to my property. Well, mind you, she is saying all of this while I am recording her, so she's just dragging herself through the mud at this point. The officers could see that Karen was harassing me and asked her to leave, warning her about calling the police for non-emergencies. She then dropped the bombshell that I should be arrested for indecent exposure, claiming that whenever she came to my house and I was in the pool, I was never wearing a swimsuit. That got me angry. She should not have been on my property to begin with, but claiming that I exposed myself to her was just a lie. The officers asked if it was true, and I told them it wasn't, then offering to show them my own security cameras to prove it. Karen did not seem to like that, insistent that she was not lying and the cops had to believe her. One cop took her towards her car, asking her to move it, while the other asked to see my security cameras. I stopped recording and showed him from an app on my phone the days that I'd been in the pool school while Karen had attempted to visit. I went through each day frame by frame, showing that I didn't do anything to her when she came over. That was enough for the cops, and once his partner came back after Karen left, he told me that if she tried to harass me again, I should just call them to report her. I decided that I was not gonna wait and ask if I could press charges on her now, since she had tried to get me arrested on false claims. The officers took my statements and told me that someone would be in touch before the end of the week. I actually got a call from the HOA board first thing in the morning. The police had contacted them about Karen after her blow-up at my home, and the HOA board apologized for Karen's behavior. Apparently they were unaware of her harassment towards me. They acknowledged that my property was my own and out of their jurisdiction and promised that they wouldn't pursue this further. The next call I got was from Karen herself, shrieking at me about how I would pay for making a fool out of her in front of the police. The police had told her about my report and she was not having it. I told her that I would take her to court if she continued the harassment, and she claimed that she would take me to court right back if I didn't give up my property. So I did something a little petty. I uploaded the video I took to social media, showing the world what kind of a person Karen was. I did not think it would get so many views, but it went viral, and a few people from the HOA messaged me about her, claiming that she had been harassing them as well about their properties, and I found out a week later that Karen had been removed from the HOA board and was actually asked to move from the community because of her actions. It made me feel better about what I had done. The next one is titled, My Neighbor is a Witch. And by the way, if you enjoy these neighbor/HOA stories, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments to show your support. My 22 male grandpa's neighbor is probably in her late 30s. I'm staying with him for a while because of a roommate situation. His property is a few acres and the neighbor's lot is similar. They are separated by trees. My grandpa has a dog, an old German Shepherd. He has gotten sensitive to noises lately, but here's the problem. My neighbor is a Halloween fanatic. My grandpa said she gets her Halloween decor up in late August. But the issue is not the decor, it is that she got this odd soundscape. The soundscape includes a fireworks/gunshot type cluster of bangs that happens every so often. Given the distance between the homes, we should not be able to hear any of it. Well, anyway, she runs it from about 5 PM until 10 PM. They don't get trick-or-treaters or anything in this area. Houses are too far apart and have long private driveways. So basically, all of this is for herself. My grandpa is too nice and conflict avoidant to do anything about it, but I feel so bad for the dog. After a day of the sounds triggering the dog, I went over and I introduced myself. It was my first time meeting her, so I didn't want to immediately launch into my complaint. I went along with some conversation to build rapport. She was extremely chatty at first, asked a lot of questions about me, tried to guess my ethnicity. I have a racially ambiguous face, and she wanted to prove that she could read my features or whatever. From there, she started telling me which celebrities I remind her of. I haven't heard of any of them, and then she started talking about horror movies. I could not get a word in, I had to interrupt her. I explained about our dog and started with, maybe you could consider using a different soundscape or turning it down. As soon as I brought this topic up, she got all cold. Her whole demeanor towards me changed, but she did agree she would turn it down. But she didn't. So I turned up to her door for the second time yesterday, and this is when it got weird. She answered the door in a full costume and was putting on a character that she didn't feel necessary to drop while talking to me. I tried to let her know that I'm gonna be making a noise complaint if she doesn't adjust her soundscape. I asked her how come she didn't turn it down. She ignored this by telling me that I look like I have a delicious liver. It's hard to express how frustrating it was, but I said nothing. I just stared at her irritated, hoping she would drop the act. Instead of getting serious, she kept the weird voice going and told me, "Lower your eyebrow, why are you so grumpy?" She also tried to reach out slowly to touch my face or something. I just turned around and left. This woman was still in her damn character. She said something after me, but I was not able to make it out enough to quote it here. I got home and made a noise complaint. Cops took my statement and then they went over and talked with her. No more soundscape, peace and quiet. Today she left a dead bird on the doorstep. Relevant comments: do you have proof like a Ring camera recording? Because it could just be a coincidence. OP responded, "It's not a Ring, but my grandpa has an old porch camera. It was her, I could tell from the Halloween wig." I'm just hoping the bird was already dead when she found it and not murdered. Another person commented, out of interest, what was her character? OP answered, so unfortunately I didn't ask, I didn't want to acknowledge it. I think it was just some kind of witch or demon costume, long white hair, long nails, red lipstick and face paint. She had on a robe with a hood that was covering most of it though. Someone then responded, okay, this woman sounds deranged, psychotic, dangerous and exactly my type. Is she single? Sorry about the dog, but if you set me up with her, I will totally change the soundscape and lower the volume. I love dogs and wouldn't be able to enjoy the spooky sounds knowing they are making a nearby dog panic. OP then said, her lack of concern for dogs and maybe animals in general is a deal breaker for most, but I'm glad you are not like that. She's all yours, man. Then someone responded, it would be a deal breaker, but I can change her, I hope. And now we got an update to the story that reads like this. And this is, by the way, from another subreddit where OP was asking, so someone put red wax with thread in it, hair and what I think was honey with cinnamon under the door handle of my vehicle. I touched it and it got all over my hand. Do those things mean anything? Someone in the comments said, you don't have to touch it to be affected, it's supposed to be placed somewhere they frequent. I would say you got spell roofied, my friend. There's several ways to get rid of this. Do your research on local weeds for your cleansing bath, that way it costs you nothing. Or play along, who knows where it'll go. OP responded, I'm just gonna ignore it, I feel like anything else will just work against me. Someone else commented, those items are mostly used in love spells. However, usage would not be where the target would see it or touch it, so either whoever did it is new to the craft and didn't know what they were doing, or it's not magical at all and someone is being a jerk. Update number 2 to the story. So she does not play the soundscape anymore, but she stuck some weird ingredients to the door handle of my vehicle. I touched the stuff and it got all over my hand, and I had a feeling it was something witchy, so I asked on Reddit and learned it is love spell ingredients. Assuming that was for me, but not completely discounting my grandpa. Well, a few days after she left me the bird, she turned the soundscape on just as I was going past her house during my run. From the way she timed it and turned it off when I had reached my grandpa's house, it was deliberate. I found it amusing because it was kinda clever. She wrote a note to me in my grandpa's native language, which is Korean. It's basically a copy of the phrase, if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. And by the way, the dog is safe, nothing has happened to him. I've already mentioned this, but there's a police report and case number assigned to this incident, and I taught my grandpa what number to call so he can continue reporting other events if they happen, to add to the paper trail. He has working security cameras on his front and back porch that are fairly decent. This is not my permanent residence, but I'm sure he will be fine. And now let's continue to the Am I the A-hole story of today. My mother-in-law's husband passed away. He has been in hospice care for about 3 years. This man is not someone either my wife or I have many good feelings about. To my wife, he was the 4th man that her mom was married to. To me, he was the ex-felon, racist, chain-smoking redneck who has been manipulative and mostly a dick to me since I met my wife 11 years ago. My mother-in-law has missed a large part of her grandchildren's first few years because she was his primary caregiver during hospice. We are relieved that he is now finally out of the picture. I'm so relieved that this man no longer has the ability to be an influence on my children. However, both of us do very much care for mother-in-law and her well-being, and she loved this man, and so she will need support. Either way, she lives 3 hours away in another state. We are a family of 4. My wife and I work full-time and have a 14-month-old daughter and 3-year-old son. My wife is wanting to go up there for the whole next week to be there for her mom. I cannot go, period. My vacation time is used up, my salary is entirely commission. If I'm not here selling work, then we don't make money, and I bring home the larger portion of our income. My wife has a more traditional salaried job and does have available PTO as well as bereavement time. My job does not give me any of that. I don't work in the automotive dealership service world, kids. I have watched our kids by myself before, but not for such a long time. My job is Monday to Saturday, 7:30 to 6 p.m. I would have to get both kids dressed and out the door by 6:45, which I already do. My wife leaves at 5:30, and also have them picked up by 7 p.m. in the evenings, and then make dinners, get them ready for bed and asleep. Throw in the cooking, laundry and grocery shopping. My wife has offered to take the kids with her, but I would rather them not miss a week of their normal routine for this circumstance. Mother-in-law is a smoker as well, and there is that. We have other family members on my side that might be able to come help me during this week, but none of that has been confirmed yet. I'm of the opinion that mother-in-law knows what it is like to be a mother and what it's like to raise a family and work, and I feel like it's not the best plan for my wife to put her family on hold for a whole week to go up there and hang out with her mom while she goes through this. Therefore, I suggested that my wife just go up for the weekend. My wife thinks I'm being insensitive and my mother-in-law has not asked for anything. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Comment number 1 said, "Oh no, you're going to have a busy, exhausting week. Boo-hoo! Your mother-in-law is grieving and your wife wants to do what's right and be there for her. She has the ability to do so because she is married to you, and from everything you've said, you sound like a great dad. Not the best husband at this moment though, you're the a-hole in this situation." Comment number 2, you're the a-hole, it's 1 week. Those kids are 50% yours and looking after them for 7 days on your own is entirely manageable. Don't be that daddy that acts like he's the babysitter, just step up. Comment number 3, you're the a-hole, it sounds like you're worried about yourself and how this situation impacts you mostly. Suck it up, mate, her spouse is only gonna die once, you won't have to suffer through this tough time too often. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I'm a 41-year-old father of 3 kids under 9. I've never been able to afford a vacation, let alone one without kids. Saved up for a very long time to take my wife on her dream trip to Bar Harbor, Maine. We live in Kansas City. First night after a day of amazing hikes and boulder climbing to see scenic peaks in Acadia National Park, we fell sound asleep until 3 a.m. That is when I hear the 2 25 to 30-year-old women next door squealing in the hallway and constantly opening and slamming their door. I was young once, partied very hard well into my 30s, and I have a ton of patience, so I gave them some grace period first, didn't say anything, fell back asleep, and 45 minutes later they are even louder through the wall, in and out, slamming doors again. And by the way guys, I would say there is a special place in hell for people who are super loud in hotels who don't give a damn about other guests. I just hate that. Anyway, I get up to say something and miss them as they are going back in the room. Fully awake, I noticed the "Please do not disturb" sign on their door, which I promptly snatched. Spent 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. reading in the lobby until my wife texted me asking where I was. After we got ready and went out for breakfast, I was there to see the maid knock and enter their room to wake them up and heard their reactions. Miserable and hungover. I gave the maid a tip of $50 and apologized for their rudeness. It's the least I could do for making her catch a stray bullet. Update: some people take this way too seriously. It was petty and an entertaining story. I was annoyed and inconvenienced, not furious. I ended up going downstairs and reading a new book by the fire in the lobby. It ended up being enjoyable. Also, I budgeted for the trip and sacrificed part of the $50 I was gonna use to buy clothing or a memento from the trip for myself and gave the money to the maid. And yeah guys, if you ever encountered entitled hotel guests, then please let me know what happened in your situation. Either way, now let's continue to the title story, which is titled "HOA sued me over $365,000 for feeding cats in my house." Look, I won't claim that my situation is universal, though I'm not quite one of those crazy cat ladies you see in the movies. I got 10 cats, 8 indoor ones and 2 outdoor ones. While I'm quite used to the fact that a lot of people lie somewhere on the spectrum between disliking cats to vehemently hating them, the last thing I expected when I got a new house was a lawsuit. It became obvious early on that this neighborhood was a very involved one. Block parties, neighborhood watch, not just the signs, and a proactive homeowners association. It was not what I was used to, but I was raised in church, so that type of community involvement is something I've experienced before. For the most part, I liked it. I was new to this area of the States, and the few friends I knew all lived in the city while I was settling into the suburbs. The neighborhood helped me feel less alone when all the cats were not up to the task and helped me find fun things to do all over the city. The HOA president, Press for short from now on, introduced himself right away. It didn't take long for a lifetime cat owner such as myself to recognize one of those people. He flinched if one of my cats so much as walked behind me when I stood in the doorway. If the conversation went anywhere past simple pleasantries, I often had to step onto my front step and close the door behind me. He refused to come into my home. Outside of the housewarming party and one other occasion for him to come to my backyard early on, he stayed scarce. This was only slightly annoying. During get-togethers, I also learned that he mostly just stayed clear of animals. One of my neighbors who owned a few dogs that were big and often considered dangerous breeds, a boxer and a pit bull, both wonderfully trained and cared for, even told me me that they would see Press walking down the street on his Ring camera, and the man would intentionally cross the street just for the stretch of his yard. For the most part, the HOA president did not exceed this level of pettiness. As long as animals were not involved, he was a civil guy. He was quite a bit older, but we had both studied computer science in college, and before things started to get worse, we would sit and discuss our different experiences. Usually, as a woman in computer science, I expect my opinions to be walked all over by men, but he respected me and was more than willing to learn things from me. It encouraged me to learn what I could from someone who had been in the field for a decade longer than me. I tried to ignore the pettiness towards animals and treat the guy as the completely decent human being he often seemed to be around other human beings. Maybe that was part of the mistake. I never assumed the yowls I would hear from my 2 outside cats would have anything to do with him. I assumed the times I came home to find my porch trashed with kitty litter and kibble scattered everywhere were just pranks from the kids who had nothing better to do in the area. I mention my backyard because that's where my outdoor cats have their food, litter, yes, even my outdoor wild cats are litterbox trained, and beds. And it is where they spend most of their time. One of them has never gotten along with many of my other cats, and the other one has never liked doors getting in his way. Not to say they did not wonder, they could freely go wherever they pleased, even if I expected them home every morning and evening for their meals. The only time I spent trying to confine them to anything smaller than the entire neighborhood was when I crammed them in kennels to bring them along with me on the move. I would prefer to avoid that happening ever again. Still, part of the freedom thing is that the outdoor cats have the entirety of the great outdoors to enjoy and often don't go around scratching up anything human. My outdoor cats are 5 and 7, and I've never had a single complaint about damaged furniture ever. The closest things are probably the cat carriers from the move. Color me shocked when the president came knocking and showed me a full set of lawn furniture torn to shreds. He claims that my cats are the only culprits he could think of, and that this is unacceptable according to the HOA contract that I signed upon moving into the neighborhood. He also mentioned it's illegal to feed wild animals like my cats in my house. I said, look, let's just calm down and talk this out. I've had some instances of my own porch being vandalized, so more evidence that these cats need to be locked up and properly disciplined. If they are pets, they should be inside with other pets. It makes no sense to treat them like wild animals unless they are wild animals. I've tried not to say anything about them up until now, but I'm tired of them attacking me or my possessions. I take a second to breathe deeply so I don't snap at him since I already had a rough day at work. The vandalization on my own porch couldn't have been the cats. They cannot throw around bags of litter and chairs that are 3 times their weight. Scratches I could understand, but if you're implying they could do this damage to your lawn furniture in a night or 2, then you're flat out wrong. Again, I just wanted to think the best of him, but the petulant annoyance that he displayed when he swore he would prove that they had been the cause of the damage, then tossed his lawn furniture, did not help. I did try to brush it all off though. Sure, you can all say that he was clearly unpredictable and unstable, but even as he peeled out of my driveway, I knew he was going home to his housewife and kids. Unpredictable for people like him usually looks like 2 beers for his football games. I assumed he would sleep it off and all would be well. When he showed up with a lawyer a couple days later to discuss the terms I had agreed to in the HOA contract though, I was shocked. He brought up an area in the contract that spoke to the feeding and care for animals that would bring about damage to the neighborhood. It was clear in the contract that damage they cause would fall under the responsibility of the resident who attracted them. Of course, all the clauses he referred to were about wild animals. I nodded along and inflated the lawyer's ego and then got back to my life. My only complaint came a day later when I texted the president and told him that it was hardly worth the cost of bringing a lawyer out to discuss something that clearly did not pertain to me. He sent a calmly worded text claiming the outdoor cats constituted wild animals. If they were not, then he said they would surely prefer to be inside the house. I disputed this and he went off the deep end. I could hear the aneurysm from down the street. I blocked his number for a couple hours and let bygones be bygones. People say an eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind, but sometimes I find that turning the other cheek leads me to more pain and less understanding. I'm not as committed as I once was to being at church every Sunday morning, but still the idea of going out of my way to harass or harm other people is just antithetical to how I was raised. I wish I had taken up arms sooner so I could have prevented what happened next. So, a couple weeks later, the president hit one of my outdoor cats with his car. I won't speak on it too much, but I did have to confine the poor guy to my porch for a few weeks after the vet visit. It genuinely scared me. I never had a cat injured before, and now one of my poor guy's 9 lives was down the drain. I could not even keep him in the house to recover because a few of my other cats really hated him. So it wasn't even a question that when he recovered enough not to hurt himself, he had his freedom back. I shouldn't have been surprised when now, 2 whole months after their previous visit, Press and his lawyer showed up at my doorstep to throw legal summons in my face and then storm off. They were suing me for supposedly illegally feeding wild cats on my property and them destroying precious HOA property. In order for this to get solved, they wanted a ridiculous $365,000 from me. Afterwards, the president stormed off. His lawyer stayed a bit more professional, if glaring a bit, before I tried to treat it all as a man uncomfortable with animals lashing out. Now he nearly killed one of my babies and still insisted that he was finding property damage over the last few weeks when one of my outdoor cats was locked up on the porch and the other one hardly left his side because it didn't make sense to him that his buddy couldn't leave while he could. When news of the lawsuit got around the neighborhood, the neighbor with the pit bull and boxer pair approached me about something he had not even realized. He had been visiting his family when my cat had initially been injured, but he had a Ring doorbell and his house was across the street from mine. When he heard about the lawsuit, he scrolled through the footage and found something he knew I would want to see. The civil suit didn't have a ton of fanfare in the courtroom. Outside of it, there were plenty of articles. Thanks to the $365,000 price tag the president had slapped on it, I sat through all the various unsubstantiated abuse that president and his lawyer threw at me, while I did not even worry to pay my lawyer for my own part. The boxer/pit bull owner was a partner at his own small firm, and he refused to let me pay. It had become personal for him. He had already had to use his legal knowledge in order to simply have his pets in the neighborhood he wanted to live in, and now he was fighting for everyone's pets. Then came around time for my statement. I wish I could say that I led everything up to a cliffhanger before a jury and then spit a countersuit in Press's face, but court is much more boring than that in real life. First, we had to prove that Press wrong in his allegations. I used images of my cats and the damages to my own porch that he claimed to be the fault of my cats to prove that they couldn't have done that damage, especially since there were not any scratches or bites on any of my possessions. When it came to the president's lawn furniture, we not only proved that many of the marks on the furniture did not resemble what would happen if a cat actually did scratch up lawn furniture, but we also began making the arguments that these outdoor cats were not wild animals. The arguments we held that were the most legal concrete were the vet records that showed they had both been fixed and were fully up to date on all their veterinary needs. Then came witness testimony to their friendly behavior towards people and the fact that other neighbors did not even find signs that they peed or pooped in their yards or gardens. I also testified that I had to regularly clean their litter box and it was unlikely that they did anything other than occasionally mark territory elsewhere. This, by the way, helps to keep other feral cats away sometimes, so if anything, they helped the neighborhood. Then the countersuit came as soon as we had the ruling in our favor, and the president found himself right back in court looking smug that he would find his way to slide out of this. We started with some more witness testimonies that proved he had always been rough towards animals. 1 or 2 neighbors even gathered some scant proof that he had harassed their pets, nothing that would hold up in court, mind you. Of course, when we brought up the video from my neighbor's Ring camera that showed the president bringing my clearly drugged cat out to the street in order to intentionally run it over, there wasn't much needed to finish out the suit in our favor. The president used the HOA's name to file the suit against me, but I knew that he was the problem. So when I filed the countersuit, it was aimed towards him as an individual, and the neighborhood is better for it. I've even considered joining the HOA and might in the near future. President paid a large fine and had to go to jail for a token couple of years for harassment and assault of my animals. Still, I didn't do it for the money. It's enough to see his wife outgoing and happy with a new boyfriend while they raised a beautiful German Shepherd together. The kids love the dog, and while they miss their father, the wife's boyfriend does seem like a good man who is doing his best to help the kids after what was understandably traumatic for them. I saw the wife and kids around plenty before, but they were much more subdued. It turns out the president was a man who thought he owned his family and his neighborhood. He was not just overbearing to those people with pets, but also to his own wife and kids. I don't truly wish suffering on anyone, but I hope this helps him to learn that sometimes there's beauty to be found in letting go of control. And yeah, Ripe stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.